Would you like to shortcut the Deadmau5 Teaches Electronic Music Production Masterclass here with me, Jerry Banfield? I'm grateful I bought the Deadmau5 Teaches Electronic Music Production Masterclass. I watched all 23 videos of the class, every minute of the class, and I hope to communicate what I got out of it here for you in less than 30 minutes for a fraction of the cost. I will share a summary of the class, what it contains in terms of the basic elements from start to finish. I'll share the best stories that I thought were a part of the class. I'll share the actions that I took out of the class. If you're taking any kind of self-help or learning or skill development program, aren't you hoping to ultimately take action, to be inspired to do something? That's what I'll hope to give you the ability to do right here, is to be inspired to take the same kinds of actions based on what I took out of the class. I will do the basics of teaching you the skills I learned out of the class. I will share with you the context that I took the class in, and I will provide challenges that came up for me as I went through the class. I hope all of this is useful for you in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the money to get the majority of the value out of that I got out of the Deadmau5 Teaches Electronic Music Production Masterclass. Thank you very much for starting this journey with me on my first shortcut, with the idea being not just a book summary, but the majority of the value in a fraction of the time. What does the Deadmau5 Teaches Electronic Music Production Masterclass have in it? In other words, what's a summary of the class? The class begins with an introduction. Deadmau5's actual name is Joel Zimmerman, and he begins with a basic look at music production. This is the part of the class that most people watch most. What I noticed going forward from the very first lecture on, people start to drop off from there. One of the main things I got right away out of the introduction is that Joel loves music. Simple, right? And Joel takes the time to mess around and make lots of different music, and he's been doing it for a long time. That's a summary of the whole class, basically. Then Deadmau5 gets into his process, his theory, all about experimentation. He has a unique approach to music creation, but really almost every artist's approach to music creation is unique. So Deadmau5 shows you his way he puts things together. The basic way he puts things together, he tries to make a chord to start off with, and he says once you've got the chord, then basically you have the whole song from there. He plays around with different synthesizer sounds, which then he demonstrates in real time how he starts to put together the elements of a track. He looks at his home studio, which he has a several $million home studio with all kinds of analog synths connected together and what looks like the inside of a UFO. It's cool, and at the same time, he makes it clear you don't need all that stuff to make amazing music. One artist on his label, Skrillex, is able to do it just on a laptop. So he shows you his really cool home studio, but at the same time, he emphasizes you don't need that to make great music. He gives a few pointers saying, one thing I liked in particular, he says that you do not want to use headphones. If you can avoid it, avoid using headphones, but rather use something that actually plays the sound back to you. This was some of the most effective advice I found in the class, because it's so tempting, and I make my music on headphones because I'm live streaming and I have a wife and daughter in the house. But this was an outstanding tip that he got early on in the class. Joel then continues with developing melodic structures. He gets into how to do loops that resolve. I liked how he emphasized when you start something like a chord or a loop, you want it to kind of resolve so that you can just loop it back and forth. The end shouldn't sound crazy different from the beginning. He looks at turning the melodies, the chords, and then the melodies made from those into an entire arrangement to make then a song, spread that out, include bass parts and leads. He gives an overview of synthesized sounds, whether you've got a chord structure or a analog synth or whatever you want to do with it. He gives you a look at how to then bring the synthesizer in and have some fun. He does several lectures in the middle about modular synths, digital versus analog synths, that if you're just trying to make music online, these aren't likely to be very relevant because you're probably not going to go spend a bunch of money and buy analog synths and try them. From what I saw as kind of a beginner, basically a digital synth can do about everything I need it to do. And if I spent 20 years doing music on a computer, maybe I might want to play around with an analog synth. Deadmau5 continues with shaping sounds and effects. I loved watching how he just played around with everything. If you get one thing out of the class, is to just play around with stuff. I know when you start out making music, it's kind of scary, like if I touch this knob, what's going to happen? Deadmau5 makes it clear, just play around with stuff. Tweak that knob. Move this around, move that around. Be sure to save your project. Then Deadmau5 goes deeper into beats. He says the kick drum is the heartbeat of the electronic music track. However, he also says something along the lines of he effing hates the kick drum, and if he didn't want to make money, he wouldn't put it in any of his songs. I hope that gives you a feel of how the whole class goes. And I'm grateful Deadmau5 makes available. He has a bunch of his kick drum loops and sounds available you can just get as a Loop Masters pack. It's not from Loop Masters, but that's the basic setup it's in. Deadmau5 in the middle of the class gets into structuring songs and remixes and then mixing and mastering. This is about where the electronic music production in terms of doing it on your own computer and making a song kind of wraps up. He offers some outstanding advice. He aims his sound levels at about -6 dB, and then he uses then limiter and compression to do whatever he wants with it after that. But before he's mixed anything, he says it's a lot easier. Just get everything at about the right volume to begin with and leave some headroom. I thought that was really helpful out of the mixing and mastering section. Then he does a case study with one of his songs mastering that. And from there, the class goes into starting your producing career. Given the statistics on the comments, most people never get this deep into the class. And the end of the class is not as relevant unless you're hoping to actually play music live. If you are hoping to play music live, there's some outstanding tips in there. He also goes into doing your own music and then looking at a label, but he says the labels he was on completely effed him over. And then he talks about getting on a label. I was curious, if the labels you were on effed you over, I would think that the advice to give would just be to forget about getting on a label. Now, he says a label can be very helpful getting your music out there, but he seems to be pretty down on labels in general. Once you have a basic understanding of the music business, as it talks about in the end of the class, from my point of view, you might as well just put your music out to your friends and family and forget about a label. Just make music you love listening to. The end of the course goes into how to produce music live on stage, and then getting the technical side set up and doing the shows, putting everything together into a masterpiece. One of the very helpful pieces of advice I liked he gave, he said he uses Macs for his live performances. Why? Because if they're on the road and something goes wrong, he can basically just take another Mac from the store and put the same software on it and run it. While he makes his music on Windows machines, he uses Macs on the road because the Macs are interchangeable. They're so similar. Whereas you go get one different Windows PC and you'll try and put everything and nothing will work properly on it. Another very helpful piece of advice. Then the 23rd lecture closes up the class. And that's it. I hope this has been an effective summary of the class that takes hours to go through, that in just 7 or 8 minutes here, you are able to get a feel of what the entire masterclass contains. What are the basic skills this masterclass teaches, and how can I communicate them to you in less than 5 minutes? The number one skill that this masterclass teaches is to play around and have fun with your music, and I hope to communicate that skill to you here. How do you do that? There's two basic ways that are very helpful you can do that. When you're creating music, I've made now 16 different tracks inspired by this class. The skills that I learned in this class that were really helpful were to just play with stuff. And this is tough for me because I want to do things a certain way and I'm scared to experiment with things lots of times. The skill I learned in this is to just mess with things. Mess with every different knob, that I don't have to know exactly what a sine wave is or a cosine wave or a saw wave or exactly what the low frequency oscillator does. I don't have to know exactly what all these things do. All I need to do is play with them and listen. Make sure that I like how it sounds and basically play around with a song until I like how it sounds. It's never going to be exactly perfect. The more I went through the videos in this masterclass, the more it became clear you don't make perfect music at any point. The best you can hope to do is make music that you love listening to and enjoy. And the skill that's behind that is to just take a leap of faith. Just throw down a chord, see what it sounds like, try a different synthesizer, change the knobs on it. You don't even have to know what they do. Just let it play. Turn the knob up and down, see how it sounds. When Deadmau5 shows how he's using his beautiful several $1,000,000 analog synthesizer setup in his studio, what does he do? He pulls things in and out. He moves knobs around on it, switches other things around, moves those knobs on it. You can essentially emulate that right away to begin, and the more you play with it, the more you get curious as to, okay, why when I turn this knob does it have this effect? Then you can look things up on Wikipedia and figure out, oh, well, this is what a low frequency oscillator does. The skill that I hope to share with you here is to just play. Just make sounds and have fun with it. Then the second part of this is to just continue making a song that you enjoy and finish it off at some point. Deadmau5 has made it clear some of the music he's taken to make has taken a long time. What I find really helpful putting these skills into practice is to just make something that I like the sound of, put it into a song, and then listen back to it. Play it in the car, play it on my iPhone, play it on my headphones, listen back to it. Don't sit there forever and continue to tweak every single thing about the song because everyone's not going to respond the same. You might change something that someone else might not like the song as much about then. Have the understanding that not everyone likes the exact same sounds and that the average person is pretty easy to please. The skill that comes from this then is to just throw together a song that you like the sound of and then render it, play it back, share it with friends and family, and then keep doing the same thing. A really easy creative process that I hope is useful to share here with you. What were some of my favorite stories that Joel shared in this masterclass? Stories are my favorite part of most things that I read and learn from. One of the stories I liked was just how Joel got into making music. He was working lots of other jobs, and he said, and this stuck with me, that he used to just stay up at night and play around with his music production equipment for hours, that he'd tweak all these different sounds. And he says that sometimes he just plays with this synthesizer just for days and he doesn't even record anything out of it. He just messes around and listens to the different sounds. He didn't start out trying to be a rock star. He just messed around and played music and had fun with it. That leads into then, how did he end up getting where he has a masterclass today? He signed up with one label after another, which he said that he felt the labels completely effed him over. He ended up starting his own record label, and it's interesting that the story of how he then met Skrillex, who he thinks is worthy of having his own masterclass. And he then signed Skrillex, and as Joel says, I gave him a retirement package and got a little bit of money out of it myself. He says that he met Skrillex while he was doing a show, and Skrillex walks up and hands him his USB drive with his album on it. And he says that Skrillex looked, and I quote, humble as F. I don't think in some formats I'm allowed to cuss doing this. So that was his exact format. I like the story of how he met Skrillex. At the same time, he gave some advice that based on what he'd experienced before. He said it's really annoying when artists come up to you and want to be signed to your label and they don't even have a full album out. They just have a song or two. He says that's really annoyed him, that Skrillex came up with a full album and just handed it to him. Now, based on what he shared about labels, the point of the story seemed to be to just forget about trying to get signed by a label. Just make your own music. Forget about getting a label to sign you. By the time you're worth signing to a label, you won't want a label anymore. And before you're ready to get signed by a label, it's going to just be a bunch of time and energy that's probably wasted on everyone's part. If you really need a label, then you probably just need to, I think he said something like, sit your ass in the studio and make music. Don't be out trying to get people to sign you when you don't even have an album out yet. And I'm grateful today. This story resonated with me as a new musician to just make my music and forget about trying to sell it to everyone. Just make music I love and enjoy. Another story I liked that he shared in the class is how he ended up getting to have his studio, and then the uselessness of it all, that he just essentially makes the money to be able to afford all these different fancy things in his studio, that then he says you don't even need all this crap. You can just, like Skrillex, make an amazing album straight on a laptop. Essentially that he works really hard and does all this stuff with labels and other artists and makes all this money, and he essentially just buys stuff he doesn't even need. I love that story, and I hope sharing this is useful for you. What is the context of how I ended up taking this masterclass? I hope sharing the exact situation I'm in that resulted in me taking this masterclass is helpful to see the potential benefits then available in your life today as I've realized them. I was referred to this masterclass by a friend. He's a music producer and sound engineer. He took the class and he said that I might really enjoy it. However, he cautioned me because I just have started. It's May 2017 as I'm recording this here. I've just started in 2017 making music, so I'm a complete beginner. I didn't even pay attention in music class in 6th grade. I gave the teacher the finger, and I, after that, figured I had no potential or any type of hope to make music. All of a sudden in 2017, I got inspired to make music. I've been watching video classes, and my friend who's helped inspire me to just do my journey, show my journey from start to finish making music, he inspired me to try this masterclass. I started the masterclass. I went through the first several videos like probably most of the other students did in the class. And then, just like most of the other students in the class, I stopped. I watched the first maybe 5 videos or so, and then I forgot about making music. After you start making music, it's fun and really exciting in the beginning. And then, for me, my mind kicked in. Well, come on, Jerry, you're just wasting your time with this masterclass. You're not going to be able to make any great music. You're not going to ever do stuff that people really care about. You're never going to have a hit song. You really stink at music production. Why waste your time? Why not do something you're better at? And I took several months off of making music then. I was all excited about making music in the first few months of 2017. Then about mid-February, I stopped. And then about 2 months later, I talked to my friend again, and he mentioned the masterclass again, and he said, very few artists online do a good job live streaming their music production process. I have an amazing live streaming setup, and I was grateful he mentioned that because it helped motivate me to see what my unique opportunity is. I don't have Deadmau5's level of skill making electronic music, but I do have a world-class live streaming setup. And who would be insane enough to show their music production process when they were a complete beginner, when they didn't know what they were doing at all? I find it's inspiring to see complete beginners try and do things, because then if you've never done it at all, it's just one step to become at the level you're seeing. Instead of like looking at Deadmau5's masterclass, I'm thousands of steps behind that. And I think that's what happens to a lot of other students is you start watching this class and you realize that you're not even anywhere close to this, and forget it, you might as well not even try to make music. I'm grateful once I started making music again, I came back to this masterclass and I watched every single video in it. And then it started to be really helpful. Instead of trying to figure out reasons that I shouldn't bother making music, which a class like this is very good at communicating those, like, well, don't even try, you're not going to be as good as him. What I started to find were little tips I could find really helpful. Play around with the music, have fun, experiment, and just do it for fun. Don't do it to essentially try and make money or have a career, but just do it for fun. If you do it for fun long enough, you'll probably get the opportunity to make money and have a career. That's the context I watched this class in, and I hope sharing that for you is helpful. What actions was I inspired to take as a result of watching this masterclass? To me, this is the bottom line of any book that is out there for self-help, for learning. The bottom line is, what did you do? It doesn't matter much to just read a book if you keep doing the same thing. If you watch the masterclass and don't adjust your music making process a little bit, then what is there of any value in it? What I actually did as a result of watching this masterclass is I started taking electronic music production seriously. I noticed the fun I was having in electronic music production, and I lowered my standards and expectations. I at least am grandiose enough that when I start something, I have this fantasy that it's going to be the best in the world, that I'm going to be the best live streaming gamer in the world, the best teacher in the world online, the best audio book recorder or narrator online. And I had the same fantasy with music. I literally banged on the keys of my MIDI controller, playing the electronic guitar, and then put a video out and thought that everyone would just love it. And after that video got a lot of dislikes, then I gave up on electronic music production for a while. This action that came out of this masterclass is a positive reinforcement loop of making music and learning. This masterclass was the first class I ever enjoyed in my entire life using to learn about music production. This class got me started with a positive reinforcement feedback loop where I watched the class, learned about music production, then I went into my studio, which I'm in the middle of now as I record this, and I started actually trying to apply it. I said, okay, this is how Joel sits down and starts a song. So I'm going to sit down and start a song the same way as Joel did. I'm going to try and write a chord, and then this is how Joel arranged the song. Several of the things I do in my music production class now, where I learned right out of here. I aim at -6 dB to get my tracks about there, unless I need to adjust the volume by hearing. I'm grateful that the main action I've taken out of this class is to just keep playing around and keep having fun with making music. And what greater action can I hope to get out of taking a class like this? Another action I've taken is to forget about making money on my music. When I get into something, I'm always thinking, how am I going to make money? How am I going to make money? And this often ruins whatever it is I'm trying to do. It's too early on when you're just playing around and learning something to think about making money, because often all the things that come with making money require that you really know what you're doing to begin with. I don't know what I'm doing enough to begin with making music to hope to make any money off of it. And even if it's possible in the future, I have enough to learn right now. And what I've started doing after I finished this masterclass, I've had this craving, this desire to watch more classes. And now, since I finished this masterclass, I've watched hours and hours more video classes on how to do electronic music production, learning about music theory. And now I consistently am watching and learning and doing. Watching how to do music production, learning new tricks, and then actually doing and applying them in my music. So I'm very grateful this masterclass started that loop back and forth of learning and doing. What were some challenges for me in going through this masterclass? One of the main challenges for me going through this masterclass to begin with was the difference between my abilities making music and Joel's. As I watched Joel make music and just talk about music, and I saw his studio setup and he began explaining his process, I felt the difference. Like in video game terms, he was a level 1000, a master prestige, an expert at the game, and here I am, a complete newbie, having no idea what I'm doing. And I felt a bit hopeless at first. Like, why even bother? Why even try? That was one of the biggest challenges getting started with the class. And I believe that this is the same challenge most people face. When you see how good Joel is at music production, when you see his studio set up, there's this why bother? Why me? There's this feeling that I don't have anything to contribute. Joel and the people along with him who are already successful making music, they're doing enough. No one needs my music. That was a huge challenge with this class, and in fact, just like most students to begin with, I bailed. I watched a few videos and stopped. I'm like, okay, whatever. Basically, the first thing I got out of the class was that Joel's done a whole lot playing music, and there's no point in me even trying. However, I guess the universe had other plans for me because my friends inspired me to keep going, to keep trying. And people on my YouTube channel called me out. They said, hey, where's your music? You said you were going to make music. It's been months. There's nothing. And I'm grateful then, once I came back to this masterclass, I found it had a ton of helpful things for me in it. And I also found that there were a lot of things I could learn from Joel that he's been through, like labels. I can learn things from him without having to go through the same journey myself. To right now up front, forget about ever having a record label. Another challenge that it wasn't too challenging for me, but it might be challenging for you. If you don't like a lot of cussing and dry humor or crude comments, sometimes rude or disparaging comments, then that might be a little challenging for you. I translate those things in my head. So when Joel goes off on a rant about something or someone, that doesn't bother me too much. It was a little obnoxious at some points in the class. At some points, I got so distracted with the language, Joel saying F this or F that, and I started laughing. I probably missed a few key points in the class because I get easily distracted by an F word here or an F word there. I'm grateful that Joel was able to honestly communicate in the class. If that's how it was easiest for him to talk, as it once was easiest for me to talk like that as well, I'm grateful he was able to do that in the class and that they didn't edit all of that out, that they actually left it in there. Finally, the end of the class was a bit challenging for me about electronic music production live, because at this point, I just don't picture doing a live show. So a lot of watching the end where it talks about live shows, I thought this is just kind of pointless. I'm not going to do a live show. This is a waste of my time. Still, I got a few helpful tips out of it that for me, I am able to just do my work today and not worry about whether I'm going to do live shows in the future or not. And if people want me to do live shows, I know they'll ask me to do live shows. So I don't need to worry about live shows. It all comes down to just having my fun making music today. And I'm very grateful that I've learned that out of this masterclass. Thank you very much for finishing this. I'm grateful you're here with me, whether you've watched this as a video class on Skillshare, where I currently have 82 video classes, or on Amazon using your Prime membership, where I currently have 10 plus hours of video sharing my autobiography, or whether you've listened to this as an audiobook on Audible, where I currently have 9 audiobooks featuring my experience learning, or whether you've read this on Kindle or on paperback. Whatever format you've used this in, I am honored you've spent this time with me. Would you please help me? If you've learned something out of this, if you found one useful tip, would you please leave a review on this to help other people understand what to expect beforehand? I know as a customer who watches video classes, who buys books on Amazon, and who listens to audiobooks on Audible, I really appreciate the time and energy other people take to leave reviews. I appreciate it so much that when I get one helpful thing out of any video class, audiobook, or Kindle or paperback that I buy, I take the time to leave a review. If I'm in a hurry and I'm just being lazy, I'll at least leave a 5-star review and not write anything if I found at least one helpful thing in it. If I found several, I'll often stop, take the time, and just say, oh my God, this is the best ever for this, and this reason. Here's why I loved it. This is what I do as a customer, and therefore I feel good asking you to collaborate with me to do the same. Your reviews can help other people to have the same experience you've had here, which I hope has been good. However, I encourage you, if you've not had a good experience, I value your tips on how I can improve and continue being of greater service to you each day. I love you. I'm grateful you're here with me today. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day today.